I'd like to point out that Commissioner Woods is joining us by telephone. So when you hear a little disembodied voice, that will be him. All right, first item on our agenda is to adopt the agenda. So moved.
Second.
Yeah, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, the next item is the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a commissioner or citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda. And all consent agenda items are action items. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I would move that we approve and accept the consent agenda with the exception that items 11 and 13 be remanded back to staff until September 19th meeting.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Is there kind of like a reverberation or something going on?
Just the power of your voice.
It could be. It sounds like it's bouncing around. Okay. All right, next item on the agenda is the West Ada School District High School request for approval, annexation, and rezone. We'll have a presentation from Mindy Wallace, and then we will hear from the school district. And then it will be open to discussion by the public.
Madam President, Commissioners, for the record, Mindy Wallace, Development Services. Before you today, we have a decision briefing for a new West Ada High School. Today, we'll go over a brief overview of the project, required on and off-site improvements, and then the applicant's request for modifications or waivers to the staff report, which includes some intersection improvements, cost of signal hardware, and future pedestrian improvements. We'll have a brief discussion of an adjacent parcel in relation to the future State Highway 16 extension, a brief summary, and staff's recommendations. So before you today, we have a decision briefing for an annexation, rezone, and conditional use permit to allow for the development of a new 246,000 square foot high school, which will serve approximately 1,800 students. The high school campus includes a stadium with track and field events, tennis courts, baseball and softball fields, and sports practice fields, and the stadium will have seating for up to 3,400 spectators. The site has frontage on Ustick Road, a principal arterial roadway, and is estimated to generate approximately 3,486 vehicle trips per day. 847 trips will occur in the AM peak hour and 514 in the school PM peak hour. The conditional use permit is specific to the high school site, and the application does include out parcels for annexation and rezone only. Those parcels are north and south of the conditional use permit area, and they will be subject to future land use applications. The West Ada School District and ACHD operate under an interagency fee waiver agreement. Therefore, the school district will not be required to pay an ACHD impact fee. And this application will be heard before the City of Meridian's Plan and Zoning Commission tomorrow, September 6th. We'll talk a little about improvements. So to serve the site, the applicant will be making improvements, including the construction of a north-south collector roadway and an east-west collector roadway that are shown on ACHD's master street map. Based on the findings and recommendations of the submitted traffic study, staff has recommended the installation of interim signals at the Star McMillan Road intersection, Star Ustick Road intersection, and the north-south collector and Ustick intersection. To offset costs for the West Ada School District, staff has recommended that ACHD partner with the district to provide signal hardware for the two off-site intersections at the Star McMillan and Star Ustick intersections with an estimated value of approximately $140,000. Staff has recommended that the signal hardware be provided for these two intersections as they are existing off-site intersections, and the school impacts the intersections primarily during the AM peak hour. However, the traveling public benefit from installation of the signals during other times of the day through reduced delay and increased safety at the intersections. Additionally, the Star Ustick intersection warrants signalization under 2020 background traffic and would be installed by ACHD at some time in the near future. So we'll move on to the school district's requested waivers and modifications to the staff report, and there are 3 of them. So we'll start with the Star McMillan Road intersection. Staff's recommended the installation of an interim signal and that ACHD provide the hardware. The applicants requested not to install an interim signal, but instead to convert the existing all-way, 4-way stop control intersection to a 2-way stop control intersection with a stop on McMillan Road. Staff does not recommend the conversion of this intersection from an all-way stop to a 2-way stop control intersection. Intersection control at the Star McMillan Road intersection was changed from 2-way to all-way in 2010 following a citizen request and the identification of this intersection on ACH 2009 high accident location list, which is now known as the high crash location list. There were a total of 30 crashes at the intersection during the 5 years prior to the installation of the all-way stop at the intersection, or 6 per year. There have been 8 crashes at the intersection in the 7 years since the all-way stop was added, approximately 1.1 crash per year. The majority of the crashes that have occurred since the installation of the all-way stop have been rear-end crashes. Additionally, new safety concerns may arise if the intersection is changed from a 4-way stop back to a 2-way stop. Drivers currently expect opposing traffic to stop at the intersection. Removing this condition creates risk that some regular drivers on McMillan Road may not notice the traffic on Star Road no longer stops, creating more severe accidents. To mitigate the impacts of the school traffic, staff has recommended the installation of an interim signal at this intersection and that ACHD provide the signal hardware. The north-south collector roadway, again, the north-south collector Ustick Road intersection, staff has recommended the installation of an interim signal, but that ACHD not provide the hardware, that the school district pay for the hardware. The school district has requested that ACHD provide the hardware for this intersection. Staff does not recommend that ACHD provide signal hardware for this intersection. When constructed, this roadway and intersection will only serve the school site. The signal is necessary to mitigate the impacts of the high school traffic, and without the development of the high school, a signal would not be needed at this intersection. On the left side of the screen is standard language that ACHD has been including in staff reports for new public and charter schools. The applicant has requested additional language be added to the condition to narrow the scope for any future pedestrian improvement requests, and that ACHD provide hardware for any future pedestrian improvements. The proposed language is in the middle column. Staff does not agree with the proposed modifications to the language for future responsibility of funding pedestrian improvements. Improvements may be needed beyond the north-south collector Ustick Road intersection, and ACHD may not have hardware, signage, or funding available. This requirement is intended to ensure that improvements are installed by the West Ada School District when necessary to improve pedestrian improvements and the safety of students. Now I want to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about State Highway 16 and an adjacent property owner. Again, the area in yellow is the conditional use permit location for the school, and the red is the annexation and rezone. The school site's located about a quarter mile west of the proposed State Highway 16 extension. One of the adjacent property owners, Boise Hunter Homes, has raised concerns regarding access to their parcel after the construction of the State Highway 16 extension project. As in other areas of the county, ITD plans to construct a network of local streets to provide access to the parcels impacted by the extension of the highway. A local street is proposed abutting the west property line of the Hunter parcel. So here in kind of this red shaded area is the school site, the blue shaded area is the Hunter parcel, and the purple is that local street that would be constructed by ITD. If the State Highway 16 extension project is constructed, then a north-south local street would be constructed by ITD as part of their project. Boise Hunter Homes has indicated that the north-south local road proposed to be constructed by ITD may not be enough access to serve their site, and has requested that the West Ada School District provide additional access through their high school parcel. Staff is unable to recommend or require the dedication of an easement or the construction of an east-west public street through the annexation and rezone parcels, as the parcels are only being considered for annexation and rezone at this time. There's no land use application with them. The easement or roadway is not needed to serve the school site, and a roadway in this location is not shown on ACHD's master street map. Connectivity and access will be addressed and evaluated per policy when those parcels develop. So in summary, staff does not recommend approval of the applicant's request for modifications or waivers to the staff report, including intersection improvement modifications at the McMillan Star Road intersection, that ACHD provides signal hardware at the north-south collector Ustick Road intersection, or modifications to the language for future pedestrian improvements. The improvements recommended in the staff report are to mitigate the impacts of the traffic generated by the high school. Staff has recommended that ACHD partner with the school district by providing hardware for two off-site intersections at a value of approximately $140,000. And the West Dayton School District and ACHD operate under an interagency fee waiver agreement. Therefore, the school district will not be required to pay the impact fee, estimated approximately $706,000. With that, staff recommends approval of the staff report as written, and I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff?
Madam President?
Commissioner Woods?
Yeah, I just wanted to disclose for the record that Hunter Homes had contacted me regarding their concerns as an adjacent property owner to this project. In response to that, I suggested that they contact you, Madam President, and get scheduled to express their concerns on the agenda, and I believe that they'll be doing so here in a minute. And so based on that, I guess my question for staff is with respect to ITD, has ITD given a formal response, or what communication or representations has been given from ITD regarding the potential impact of future Highway 16 off-ramp and the adjacent property owned by Hunter Homes, and how they'll have access?
Could you understand the question?
Yeah, President Baker and Commissioner Woods. ITD hasn't provided ACHD any specific comments regarding this application, and that perhaps that's something to be better addressed by the applicant.
Okay. I guess one more question for staff, if I can. Since this is a high school, the surrounding pedestrian infrastructure is going to be critical. How do you assess the adequacy of pedestrian infrastructure to support the high school, given the location and the limited pedestrian infrastructure around here?
Again, President Baker and Commissioner Woods, currently there are little or no pedestrian improvements in this area at all. The traffic impact study indicated that students would be safety bused until such a time as pedestrian improvements or development occurs and there are sidewalks and other improvements in place. That's part of the reason why staff doesn't want to modify our standard language that the school district would be responsible for future pedestrian improvements as they are warranted or become available.
Any other questions?
Yes, Madam President.
Commissioner Goldthorpe?
Not a question, because Paul just asked the same question I had, but I have exactly the same disclosure to make with regards to ex parte communication with Boise Hunter Homes.
Okay, any other further questions for staff? All right, if not, I'll ask the applicant to come forward. State your name and address for the record. Oh, thank you.
Good afternoon. Name is Matthew Adams, 462 East Shore Drive, Eagle, Idaho, 83616.
Are you going to have other representatives from West Data testify as well? Or are you going to be doing it?
It is possible if questions arise that I'm unable to answer.
Okay,
I'm going to do the first presentation.
okay, thank you.
Well, thank you for your time, commissioners, and thanks to your staff for preparing the report. Mindy covered our requests fairly well. We do feel that the traffic study lays out options. We don't feel that way. The traffic study lays out options for these intersections, and that's where our request for some modifications comes from. On item 3 of the staff report, this is the Star McMillan intersection. The traffic study describes going to a two-way stop control with turn lanes as creating an acceptable level of service at that intersection. So with that in mind, that's our request. We do understand the information Mindy presented. However, we have to go by the TIS, the traffic impact study, and we can't speak to the fact of whether or not accidents would increase or decrease with a signal. All we can go by is acceptable level of service. We do feel strongly that following the TIS is the right way to go on this option. Item number 4, or staff report item 4, is the north-south collector. The traffic study, again, on this item gives options and does not require a signal for this intersection to perform at an acceptable level of service. We agree that it'll be better with a signal, and we think we'd like to partner with ACHD on implementing an interim signal at that location. But as a partnering approach, that's where we came up, or that's why we are requesting that the hardware be provided by Ada County Highway District. And then finally on item 16, the pedestrian hardware, we are in agreement that at some point pedestrian crossing hardware could be needed to get students across the north-south collector. The problem we have, or the concern we have with the condition as written, is that there's no geographic or time constraint on the condition. So that condition could be imposed anywhere at any time as by someone who knows the name Owyhee High School or has a student there, anywhere. And that's too broad of a condition to burden the school board with. So what we would like to do is limit it geographically. Time's a little harder, but geographically, if we could limit it to the north-south collector, we would be more than happy to enter into that agreement. The other thing I did want to address is the question from on the phone is ITD. ITD has not provided any kind of formal response to the school district. However, the staff report for our application with the city does include a letter from ITD, and I don't know if it's appropriate for me to read to you. It's very short.
Sure.
The items that are in that. So this letter is addressed to the city of Meridian, sent via email, signed by Ken Couch, which is the Development Services Coordinator. He states 5 points. 1, this project does not abut the current state highway system. 2, the applicant is aware this project is near the future extension of Highway 16 and is working with ITD to accommodate future projects. Item 3, Idaho Code 40-1910 does not allow advertising within the right-of-way of the state highway. Item 4, IDAPA 39.03.60 rules govern advertising. I'll skip over that. Item 5, ITD does not object to the annexation and zoning as presented in the application. ITD recommends that the applicant continue to work with ITD staff on access concerns for the conditional use permit. So there is nothing specific about any kind of access. ITD has an access plan for the impacts that they will create, and we don't object to that. Our project does not prohibit ITD from implementing their current plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Yes, Madam
Althorp?
President. One extra, disclosure, and that's because Trustee Buitene just came. He and I have also had a very brief discussion about this particular item, just as part of a social discussion we were having. But I do have a question, and that is why the district found it so difficult to deal with Boise Hunter Homes on their request for access, since there's absolutely no idea of when Highway 16 will be developed.
The school district has acted in good faith with all the neighbors. We've been in contact with all neighbors that are adjacent to our parcel. And specifically on the Woodside parcel, because our application does not impact their access from Ustick or McDermott, or the planned access from on the ITD map, and we do not control the property that's adjacent to Woodside at Ustick, we are unable to provide that access directly. We did offer to provide an easement across our property on the south edge of our site for any future roadway construction that Woodside may desire to construct. And at this point, that's, I believe the response was that they would like us to actually construct that roadway.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I just have a question. The staff report indicated that there's no pedestrian infrastructure, no bicycle infrastructure there now. We don't anticipate that until there's development in the area. ACHG has required you to do traffic studies in anticipation of automobile traffic, but we do not measure or require any sort of pedestrian or bicycle infrastructure study or movement of pedestrians. What you do have, though, is experience with major high schools in the West Ada School District. And you have had the ability to see whether the pedestrian and bicycle movement in and to those large schools is adequate or could be improved. Can you enlighten me if there is any lessons you've learned from that you'll be applying here, so that it doesn't become, a campus that's completely car dependent, and we lose the opportunity to actually put in the kind of bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure that ought to be for every public school, every school.
Thanks for the question, Commissioner. So, yes, the West Ada School District has learned lessons on every project they've done, and they work hard to implement safety features, whether it be how they develop the site, how they develop adjacent access, or how they do safety busing. Of course, they will implement safety busing as needed for any student that would have to cross any kind of roadway that is unsafe. Pedestrian movement is a great question. This plan as submitted, we've done a couple things. One, we have a 10-foot multi-use pathway along the south edge of our parcel that's consistent with the City of Meridian's Pathways Master Plan. When Highway 16 happens, it'll be interesting how that connects further to the east. We don't know exactly how that would occur, but we have that, which is long-range planning for bicycle connection. We've enlarged the minimum requirement on our north-south collector is a 5-foot sidewalk. We're proposing an 8-foot sidewalk because we know in the future it's going to look pretty lonely day one, 8-foot wide, but in the future, potentially, or we see that we'll get a lot of kids from the north walking down that sidewalk. So we've enlarged it. In the collector, we have bike lanes. And then we also have sidewalks on the east-west collector that would connect for students coming from the north and the east. We, unfortunately, cannot construct things beyond that because we don't control the property. And the school district, when different developers bring applications to the City of Meridian, they generally don't take sides. They aren't in favor or against developments, and they're not allowed to impose development standards on them. So we would love for every development to provide great walking pathways to the high school, and we hope that they do that, but we don't have any control over that occurring at this time. Roadway, which is also, I think you're question probably included car traffic and if it's safe in and out. We do believe that we have some safety features built into this school site that were not considered at other school sites. And mostly that's the traffic pattern from the collector into the site. We anticipate student parking on the south, so they're the first group to exit the roadway, and then they're the last group, considering traffic moving north to south, to enter the roadway when they leave. What that does is that allows students to get off the roadway and drop off traffic to continue on the roadway. Drop off lane and drop off traffic, therefore, does not block traffic trying to get into the parking lot. Buses, when they enter or exit, are exiting on the far north, and once they exit in a big line and they're traveling south, all other traffic has to wait. They can't make left turns, and all the buses get to continue and leave. So there's some things done to address that, and that's in the TIS. There's some exhibits that are shown to show that traffic. So yeah, lessons learned. We're always trying to improve, and we feel like this site plan does address all known behaviors and accesses that we could anticipate. Thank you.
I'd like Mindy to answer the question about the, limiting the pedestrian issues that the school district has to deal with just to the collector. I mean, could you just give us your input on that?
President Baker, I think part of our reluctance with that is the high school will be serving a large site, and if, we need a pedestrian crossing or signage or something later down the road, like at Star and Ustick, the school district wouldn't be responsible for that. The highway district would then have to go in and install whatever may be warranted at that time to accommodate pedestrians walking to the high school. At this point, we just don't know what those future needs will be as those pedestrian improvements are constructed, and we just feel like this gives us more flexibility, more options in the future.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
It's also for Mindy. On the picture of the proposed layout of the high school, it shows the access point there in the middle of what I assume is the parking area. Is that going to be too close to what might otherwise be assumed to be the road going into Boise Hunter Homes development? Or will there be enough room for the both of them?
President Baker and Commissioner Goldthorpe, there would be enough room for both of them and still meet our access spacing policies.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
So we have Jeff Wardle signed up to speak. Are you here on behalf of Hunter Homes? So you're going to be presenting their point of view.
Madam
Okay.
President, Commissioners, and if you don't mind,
If you could give your
I'd
name
like
and
to move
address.
over there.
Sure, and just give your name and address for the record when you get
Perfect.
there.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Commissioners, Jeffrey Wardle, my address is 251 East Front Street, Suite 200 in Boise. I am counsel for Boise Hunter Homes. Boise Hunter Homes owns the property at the northwest corner of McDermott and Ustick. And I want to be absolutely clear as we start that we're not here today because we oppose the school. Why we're here today is because we are concerned at the lack of attention that's being posed by all of the agencies to the cumulative impacts that are going to befall my client's property. And it's easy for the West Ada School District to say, well, we're not affecting your client's property, but that's what we hear from ITD, that's what we hear from the City of Meridian, that's what we hear from all of the agencies. So why we want to be here and talk about this application is fundamentally, you have some transformative infrastructure projects that are going to happen at this intersection that will materially impact and externalize public costs on a single property owner. What we're here to do is talk about what the impact is of that and why Boise Hunter Homes is so concerned. So the first slide we have before you is a depiction of where the Boise Hunter Homes property is. Boise Hunter Homes purchased this property 11 years ago through one of its holding companies, Woodside Avenue Investors. It purchased this property before ITD had initiated its Highway 16 study. When Highway 16 study came through and ITD aligned the infrastructure, did the other work related to it, the result is that Boise Hunter Homes property will be bisected in the future into two parcels. It's going to be divided into two parcels, one east of the highway, one west of the highway. Moreover, this is just ITD's contemplated take. This doesn't address potential other additional access issues arising from the fact that even though ITD contemplated a local road at this alignment right here, due to the slope of the ramp coming off the overpass, due to ACHD's requirements, it's anticipated that any local street access at this intersection here will not be signalized. It will be access controlled with a right in, right out, limiting the circulation in this area. Now, we are sensitive to the school district's issues and concerns, and we've provided a variety of alternative solutions, but they have yet to show a site plan that acknowledges and recognizes that. We're concerned as well with the statements in the staff report that, well, we really can't address this because this application only deals with the high school site. And you guys and I have all been to this rodeo before when I brought other applications in for clients and we get told you need to look at the broader area. The TIS identifies what it identifies and we don't question it, but the reality is it really didn't contemplate what the overall impact of a 65-acre high school and a highway interchange will have on traffic patterns in that immediate neighborhood. And that's why we're here today. Why we're here today is because we recognize that your policy contemplates addressing these issues. You contemplate and require applicants to look at the overall circulation pattern that exists based upon their projects. Pursuant to 7206.24, it's clear that development applications are not to cause undue hardship on adjoining properties. Now, the school district has indicated, well, we don't control this property, but the reality is, as they acquired this, they have had those negotiations and discussions with Flowers. There have been those discussions. As we look at what needs to be done here, we recognize that there's a Nampa Meridian irrigation facility down there that needs to be addressed. And all we've asked is for everybody to come together, come up with a plan to solve this, and instead the solution we get is, well, you guys can deal with it, we'll give you an easement in the future, but it ignores the fact that they have surplus property that because of all the issues we've talked about already, won't be able to get direct access onto USTIC. So West Ada, Flowers, Boise Hunter Homes ought to be working jointly today on a solution that's going to ensure that the connectivity in this area isn't detrimental to pedestrian access, isn't detrimental to future right-of-way, doesn't result in additional costs, doesn't result in additional condemnation expenses down the road and in the future. Additionally, how many applications have I brought in where our clients have been required to provide stub streets to future development off-site, even for future phases that aren't currently being developed? That's consistent with your policy. It's nothing unusual that you've imposed upon private development. When looking at stub streets and the appropriateness of it, it's important to recognize the reason you do this is to future-proof your right-of-way, to ensure that we don't have these issues, we don't have the additional unnecessary cost. We recognize that your proposed corridor plan contemplates the collector at the half mile. We had originally suggested that the collector be relocated to the quarter mile and everybody work around that, but we understand your plan. But ITD's plan is to include a local street. There will need to be some degree of connection through that local street to minimize additional trips up past the other school sites that the district has proposed. It's also important to evaluate the potential for redevelopment and the configuration of those parcels. And so we recognize the school district's like, well, we're not taking your access because ITD will do that at some point in the future. It's not us. But where you're building a high school campus with no internal connectivity to adjoining properties, it's something that has to be taken into consideration. We also recognize that ACHD staff has indicated to us that yes, you will have whatever access you come in with right now and until State Highway 16 is constructed. And that's what we're asking. And in this, we appreciate the meetings and the visits that we've had, the communication that I've had with council for West Ada School District. It has been meaningful, it's been substantive, but these are issues that shouldn't be kicked down the road. We can't kick this can down the road. That if in fact this project is going to be allowed to proceed in a true greenfield location where there is no infrastructure currently, it makes no sense to create infrastructure problems for the future. So what are we asking for? Well, we request that the district imposes a condition of approval, a condition related to access. And we think there are three potential scenarios for that. The first would be to add a condition of approval requiring the alignment, preservation of right-of-way, and construction of that local street on the east side of the property now, consistent with ITD's plan. The second alternative would be for the road that Mr. Adams had articulated. We've provided a couple different drawings and designs. One, if they can't get approval from Flowers, would skirt the Flowers property, but we have not seen any modifications to a site plan that would address that. We think the more appropriate location would be a straight access road that would come across. And we're certainly amenable to cost sharing for that, but the reality is that the West Ada School District is going to require that road just as much as we are. And so it can't be a situation of, oh, you take care of it in the future, because you have to deal with the Nampa Meridian facilities. You have to deal with what your access requirements are going to be. You have to deal whatever that application is for them in the future to deal with that surplus. And the reality is, today the property is not landlocked, but every plan that has been set forth and exists will indicate that this property will be constrained by access. You will have a freeway interchange right here. You will have a significant ramp with significant slopes coming down like that. If there is the local street constructed here, that will require additional ramping and additional right-of-way to facilitate bringing it up to grade. So we're not opposed to their application. It's just that these matters need to be addressed now. Finally, the question was raised about ITD, and we're a little surprised because we're aware of Mr. Couch's memo, but the district engineer also provided a letter on August 24th, 4 days before Mr. Couch's communication, to the city of Meridian. And it is, I wish the agencies did a better job of communicating with each other, because you certainly don't have this in front of you, and we'll leave it for the record, but I'll read it in. Stated August 24th, 2018 to Caleb Hood from Amy Revis, the District 3 engineer, regarding West Ada School District proposed development vicinity of Ustick and McDermott Road. Dear Mr. Hood, the Idaho Transportation Department, ITD, is reaching out to you to ask your agency's assistance in preserving right-of-way needed for future State Highway 16 alignment. When this corridor is constructed, ITD will need to build additional local road infrastructure that will reconnect parcels cut off from the local road system by the new highway. The current proposal identifies a local road to be constructed between Ustick Road and McMillan Road on the quarter mile. Recently, it's been brought to our attention that the West Ada School District's currently proposed site plan does not preserve right-of-way on the east side of their parcel for the construction of this roadway needed to serve several parcels that will be cut off from current access to McDermott when the highway is built. While that is the preferred location, and we would hope the city would require preservation of right-of-way future corridor in that location, ITD is willing to review any proposed alternatives that will maintain the necessary connectivity for all parcels affected by the future construction of Highway 16 in that area. These alternatives may include frontage or backage roads that would be constructed by developers as they build their sites. I ask that the City of Meridian evaluate this development, future access needed be adequately addressed to assist the facilitation of the State Highway 16 alignment. If you have any questions or concerns and would like to explore alternatives to our proposed access, please contact me to set up a time. And I believe what Ms. Revis is communicating is essentially what your staff put in the staff report as well, that we need to take additional steps now with this application to preserve the right-of-way that's going to be necessary to meet the needs of the entire neighborhood. We know, and I appreciate your questions about how what lessons the West Ada School District has learned about access. We know that this is a greenfield site. As a parent of children who attend West Ada Schools, we're lucky that we're close and we have internal access to it. But this site plan, as currently configured, really cuts off access to anything located to the east. It cuts off vehicular access, it cuts off pedestrian access. So all we're asking for is that these issues need to be addressed now. Thank you, commissioners. Any questions?
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Wardle? I had a question. You wish the West Ada School District to construct that southerly backage road and not just provide an easement.
Madam President, we had communications with them about what would be an appropriate level of cost sharing. They came back and said, we'll grant an easement, you can build it. Our response is, you're going to need it for your surplus, to access your surplus in the future. So let's come up with an appropriate level. I mean, that's really where the negotiations have gone. They said, we'll grant you an easement, but you have to build it. We offered a percentage that they rejected and just said that we'll do an easement.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions for Mr. Wardle? No. I had a question for Mindy. Were you aware of the letter from the Amy Rivas to Caleb Hood?
President Baker, ACHD was provided a courtesy copy of that letter after it was sent, and that's discussed on page 24 of your staff report. The report was written actually before we received the correspondence from the city, but staff did attend a meeting at ITD where Amy Rivas did discuss the potential for requiring right-of-way from the school district's east property line, and that's discussed in the staff report.
Thank you. Commissioner Woods, do you have any questions?
Not at this time, no.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on this item? No? Well, then I'll give the school district a few minutes for rebuttal, if you wish.
Thank you, commissioners. So I have some quick rebuttal.
You'll have to give your name and address again for the record.
Oh, Matthew
unfortunately.
Adams, and 462 East Shore Drive, Eagle, Idaho, 83616. So I have a couple quick items I'll address, and then I am going to invite some of my colleagues to kind of close our rebuttal comments, if I could. Regarding the access, we are in agreement with the ACHD staff report. The presentation did a good job of pointing out the impact of the Highway 16 extension. It appears that Woodside Development, having been unable to reach an agreement with us, is now asking ACHD to imply conditions that they're unable to achieve or unhappy with ITD's plan. It seems more appropriate that Woodside would simply work with ITD to restore access when the highway goes through. This exact scenario is going to be repeated dozens of times from Highway 2026 to the freeway, to Interstate 84. And ITD has stated they will work with each property owner to restore access that they interrupt. Our application with the roadways we show is consistent with the ACHD master street map. Our project does not eliminate or impact access to the Woodside parcel. West Ada School District does not control the property that the first, I don't know how many feet, 600 feet or so from Ustick North. So we're unable to do anything in that area. West Ada has offered the easement. The cost share agreement that Mr. Wardle referenced was Hunter Homes would cover 10% of the cost of the construction of that roadway. And the West Ada School District was not satisfied with that offer. West Ada School District does not need access to that southern parcel today. They don't have plans to develop that in the near term. preservation of right-of-way on the east edge of our property could be accomplished. We would want to make sure it could revert back to private West Ada-owned property in the event that it is never utilized. I do want to point out that West Ada School District's constructing 2 collectors. The one on the west side, we worked with staff to accomplish this and the developer to the north in our outreach to all developers. The north-south collector has been shifted slightly, and all of the right-of-way and all of the construction's on West Ada property. This is to prevent negative impacts to that neighbor, and it's because West Ada controls their own property and can make that construction happen. We were unable to force, I guess, for lack of a better term, that west neighbor to allow us. We would have to do a take of their property. So in good faith, we've shifted to the west. It is conceivable that Woodside could build the exact access they're talking about through the easement we've provided or offered, through Flowers, through fully on their own side without impact to the West Ada School District property. So there is a precedent of how we're handling things that they could employ as well. But thanks for your time. I don't know if you have any more questions. I'm going to ask Bill Hamlin to come up and just make a couple closing comments.
I do.
Commissioner
I have one
Yes.
question. You mentioned that Woodside had made you an offer and that wasn't acceptable. Was there a counter offer made?
No, there was not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, come forward, give your name and address for the record.
Mark Freeman, 953 South Industry Way in Meridian. I'm counsel for the Meridian School, for the West Ada School District. I still make that mistake. Good afternoon. If I can, Commissioner Goldthorpe, on the issue of the compensation, that basically occurred between Mr. Wardle and myself via communication. And the first point I'd like to make is that West Ada doesn't need access. There isn't a future need for access. They will have access to their parcel to the south when the when the mid-mile or collector street is built. They'll have access, so they don't need access. We see the request from Hunter Homes for the road through the southern portion of the school district property as a benefit solely to Hunter Homes and the owner of that property, Woodside. We don't see that as a benefit to the school district. In these discussions between the parties and their counsel, the school district offered to set aside, valuable land sufficient to enable Woodside and Hunter Homes to extend a road in the future, and they've basically shut down every one of those offers. They don't want an easement. They want the school district to build a road. And it is true that this is a greenfield site, but we need to understand that this school district is a public entity, and public dollars and the funds that they receive come from our public for education purposes. Yes, do they have to satisfy various requirements when they develop like anybody else? Yes, they do. But extending this road through to solve a problem between Hunter Homes and an ITD is not a valid reason to spend school district funds. These are public funds. Whatever isn't used in the education or the construction of this site is going to be used somewhere else for education purposes. So we thought, Matt just discussed don't forget there's a connector road up above, and Hunter Homes does have the potential to get access to their site from there. Right now, again, and Jeff acknowledged it, there isn't an access issue. Hunter Homes has access on both roads right now. It's a future issue. And we think these issues, the offer of the easement was more than adequate and allowed the school district to, wasn't without some cost in the land and an adjustment of their site plan. But we got down to discussions, and the roundabout way of getting to this, Commissioner Goldthorpe, is they offered 10%. And and the school district doesn't feel like they should have to contribute at all, but Hunter Homes offered to pay 10% of the construction of that road, which we see for their sole benefit and the benefit of their property. So that was declined, and we went back to our original offer is, here's the easement. If you need the road in the future, come and build it at your expense. But we just didn't feel that that was appropriate for the school district to have to pay for that. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Unless there's any questions.
Thank you. This was your rebuttal period, so what are you gonna be adding?
I'm Bill Hamlin, address 216 Southwest Fifth Avenue, Meridian. My role is I'm responsible for managing the design team, and I wanted to put the context of this decision-making, in perspective. My hardest task to complete on a project is make sure I'm balancing all the needs with all the costs. There's always a list of needs longer than the costs. It's a very efficient, cost-effective school. However, if we encumber it with additional development cost, that money comes from somewhere in the budget, and that affects the delivery of education. It affects the amenities we can have in the school. So the district's been very responsible about providing a very efficient, very appropriate school design. However, we want to make sure we're meeting design standards, being responsible in that way without paying additional costs for other infrastructure that's not necessary, as we believe it will affect amenities in the school and the delivery of education.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. No, but Mr. Wordle, we're not gonna have this back and forth. I mean, I think,
Madam President, I just object to the fact that there has been a
Okay.
significant amount of new information introduced by
Okay.
the school district in their rebuttal. So
okay,
if,
but please.
and that's not what we're here to do, but it is.
Okay, our
a
council is,
disservice.
okay, thank you. I think we understand that. Are there any more questions for staff?
Can we just,
No.
we need to make our record, Madam President.
No, our council is saying no. I mean, I understand your point of view, but,
It's not fair to the public to allow a public agency to proffer additional evidence and information on rebuttal when we weren't asked about the scope of that negotiation. So that's all-
but Mr. Wordle, that, I
But
understand,
it-
but we are not party to those negotiations. We understand that they took place. We understand they didn't go anywhere. We
No.
understand there were no counteroffers, that sort of thing.
Okay, we
Madam President,
may
I ask a question about the scope of the
we object to
negotiation?
what the school
No,
district's
no.
council was allowed to introduce just now.
Thank you. Okay, let's hear from our council.
No, it's fine.
No, that's fine? Okay. But I do have a question for you, actually.
Oh, great, thanks.
Okay, as long as you're up there. We have in the past required stub streets. I mean, we do that all the time, do we not? And we require that the development of that property provide those stub streets.
Madam President, Commissioner Baker, Commissioners, President Baker, that is true, but remember that in terms of development applications, that the overriding principle is really restricted by the Constitution and our ability to exact improvements. And the test for that is whether the impact of the school or the project that's being proposed requires that it be mitigated with improvements, including the stub street. And if the cost of that exceeds what the actual impact is, then that's an illegal exaction. And so the commission, most certainly, we've done that in the past, but generally the stub streets do not require, they have to look at the cost of that in association with the impact caused by the development. In this case, I think that in terms of our development staff, they've looked at it, and the actual cost of the improvement as far exceeds the impact or the necessity of that. And so that's why that it's was not being required at this time.
So that's more of a land use decision.
Yes,
So that would be in front of the city of Meridian
yes,
or Star or wherever.
yeah.
So we can't require that, but we could make a recommendation?
Yes, you can in the application that's before you. And I'd also like to comment that the law of at the time that the commission reviews that is basically the date of the application. And that, while I most certainly feel sympathetic to Mr. Wardle's plea about, future construction and ITD issues, really the commission is bound by what our policies are as of today's date. And I think he did a fair job in showing those policy sections, and I think he found the right buzzwords. But at the end of the day, the school's impact and its necessity does not require the construction of that southern road, and that they provide adequate access to its facility. And I think at the date of the application, I think the Hunter Homes, they currently have adequate access. I think that what they're really asking is that they're asking for an improvement that's being caused by a future road project by ITD. And there's a provision in Idaho Code 676519 that requires, at least the city planning and zoning requires those parties, the city and the local highway district, and frankly, the Idaho Department of Transportation, that whenever a school facility is being proposed, that the parties get together and address all of the impacts of that, including pedestrian facilities and the like. And I think that's the reason why ITD's been involved. But the city really is in a position to require ITD and their response in any future corridor planning. ACHD could not require those in terms of exacting those improvements. If we did, we would have to pay for those in terms of just compensation. So, I think the staff report has done the best with the policies that we have, and this is how we've addressed that and the conditions that they've required.
Okay, thank you. All right, are there any other questions for staff? If not, is there a motion?
Yes.
Mr. Goldthorpe?
Madam President, I would make a motion that this particular request for approval be deferred until such time as the issues we have heard from with Boise Hunter Homes and Woodside and the West 80 School District be at least in gentleman's terms agreed to. I think that perhaps that's my motion. And the reason for that is I think that this is one of those situations where the Land Use Planning Agency should have made this decision before we even saw it.
Second the motion.
Is there any discussion?
Madam Chair, I'm not going to support the motion. I don't think it's appropriate for us to defer this and potentially hold up the school's development. So I'm not going to support the motion.
Madam President,
Mr. Goldthorpe?
one of my many philosophies of life is short and sweet, 3 words, and that's tomorrow never comes. And in my experience with deals, I have found that if you don't have one, you don't have one. And that's another reason for this motion.
Mr. Hanson?
Yeah, Madam President, I agree that as council has cited, the requirement of the city to get together all of those entities to address the future impacts. It's appropriate to have that. We're all siloed with different authority. ACHD has very few tools to measure some of those impacts, and we've addressed some of those, raised those today. We don't know what they're going to be. I think a case has been made that there could be potential undue hardship if we move forward, and that the cumulative impacts would be something that the taxpayers will bear, as well as on taxpayers with regard to the limited use of property adjacent to where this development is going to take place. I don't think we can kick this down the road and allow for those decisions to be made in the future. By making this decision, we will limit those choices in the future. So it's appropriate that Meridian convene this and resolve these, as I understand they're required to by law.
Well, I understand the tenor of the motion, and I sympathize with the issues before us, but I do not think it is our place to require a negotiation between the school district and Hunter Homes. What I think we can do is encourage that negotiation to take place by providing a recommendation to the city of Meridian where the actual authority lies in order to require this, that they do that. I mean, this goes before planning and zoning tomorrow. I suppose if we defer our approval or disapproval of this, then they don't have their meeting tomorrow and it slows everything up. So I don't think I'm not going to be supporting the motion, although I understand the reasoning behind it. Mr. Woods, did you have it? Mr. Woods?
I had a question.
Sure.
I thought by law we were required to take action within a certain period of time from the application.
Mr. Price, can you answer that?
Madam President, Commissioners, again, Steve Price, General Counsel. Commissioner Woods, you're right. We most certainly can delay an application, but it can't be for an unreasonable period of time. I'd like to remind the commission, though, that there's no plat in front of the commission where we have the authority to make a decision, thumbs up or thumbs down. We are in a recommending capacity on a conditional use, rezone, and annexation request. Anything that the commission does would be only in a recommending capacity. And again, under the provision that I cited, that the Meridian Planning and Zoning Commission is the one that has the authority and really the responsibility for any improvements that would be associated with the development of a school site.
Madam Chair,
Ms. Arnold?
I'd like to make a substitute motion that we approve this application as presented in the staff report, and that we add a recommendation that, to the city of Meridian that they try to get the parties together to have a discussion about the potential improvements that would need to be made
To the southern portion?
to the southern portion of the property.
Is there a second? I'll go ahead and second the motion. All right, so the motion,
Madam President,
Mr. Woods?
just for discussion purposes, I think that our jurisdictional authority here is pretty limited, and so I support that, but the wording has got to be a little stronger. I think that it's got to be clear that the city of Meridian understand that this is really in their sole discretion and the decision here, and so it's important, and we have to strongly recommend that this be worked out before their final decision. The argument that ITD is going to face this time and time again is not sufficient to kick the can down the road. You know, it's not fair to applicants that they be left with uncertainty for a long period of time. So, you know, that the wording that they try to work this out, I think, has got to be stronger. We have got to make sure that they know that failure to work this out, you know, potentially puts a burden on the highway district in the future to have to come back in and provide access. So, you know, that's one element I would ask the seconder to amend the motion on. The second thing would be to add also a provision that says that there are limited pedestrian facilities in the area, and that there's no plans to provide those pedestrian facilities other than through development. Now, if the school district would like to work with the highway district we could use our condemnation authority to acquire the land, and then they could be with the sidewalks would be put in, and then they can be reimbursed later. But if that's an important element, then we would encourage the city to ask the school district to work with us in providing pedestrian facilities. So that's my comment for what it's worth.
Thank you. Does the maker of the motion accept that change?
I think I'd like to ask our general counsel if that is within our authority to to add the items that Commissioner Woods has asked be added.
Madam President, Commissioners, again, Steve Price. I did listen to Commissioner Wood's conditions of, or amendment to the existing seconded motion. He most certainly, we have the ability to make any recommendation to the city of Meridian, and I believe that his comments are appropriate given the circumstances, and I do agree that this is something that does need to be addressed, especially along this whole corridor. And I think this is going to be a test to all of the parties, but I think that what he's required is most certainly within our authority to make recommendations.
So,
Given that, then I would add the language that Commissioner Woods has suggested to the motion.
and as the seconder, and I agree, because I do think that connectivity is going to be extremely important in the future. If we don't allow for it now, you're never going to be able to recapture it in the future. So, Mr. Goldthorpe?
Madam President, I'm remembering a hearing we had that was kind of similar months ago now to make a recommendation as to the Costco project in Meridian. And interestingly enough, Commissioner Woods came up with a recommendation that I believe we all thought was going to make that whole project a slam dunk, which was to have the Costco folks do all the road improvements before they opened their doors, which wasn't part of the original application. They had a 2-year deferral. The city of Meridian's still trying to figure out where to put the bathrooms in that building and haven't given final approval. So like I said, tomorrow never comes. That's my only comment.
Madam Chair, my only comment is that I appreciate Commissioner Woods' detailed description, which I'm sure was picked up by the record, but it indicates that this is not ripe and that we should allow the city to work the details out and then come back to us, because I'm sure there are a few things that we haven't thought of yet that really ought to be worked out between the parties, because the city has the authority, the land use authority, economic development, and other issues within its authority, and this agency does not.
Okay. But, all right, any other further comments? All right, all in favor of the substitute motion strengthened by Mr. Woods' recommendations, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Hey,
Motion carries. Okay, so hopefully everybody understands what we did here. There will be a report sent to the city of Meridian with our recommendation for their hearing tomorrow, or perhaps one of our staff members could go and explain what's going on. As we said, connectivity is extremely important, and we would like to see that occur. We can't force anyone to do it, but we certainly hope that the parties get together and come up with a solution that's amenable to both of them. Thank you. All right, that concludes our regular agenda. Is there anyone who wishes to address the commission under public communications? If not, meeting adjourned.
well, I hope it works.
Well, I don't see how it is.
No, just, the only other thing you could have done is defer it, and, you know.
Yeah, deferring it. I mean, we need to send a strong message to the